We've got the riots in the streets, and now we've got the further consideration of censorship. We might say that we are finding ourselves very rapidly in a situation that echoes the 1930s. Social media platforms have revolutionized communication, providing unprecedented access to information and the ability to share that information globally. But this freedom has come with significant challenges, particularly concerning the spread of harmful content. And the UK government's um, reconsideration of this concept, reviving powers which were proposed by the last government to force internet companies to remove legal but harmful content. This highlights the ongoing debate about censorship and the role of social media in shaping political and public discourse. The concept of legal but harmful content has been contentious, dating back to the last few digital culture, media, and sport secretaries, the culture secretaries like Nadine Dorries and Lucy Fraser, Michelle Donnellan, these inadequate individuals who could barely run a bath of water, let alone a significant ministry. And all of them were appointed and showed extraordinary promise, and all of them failed. All of them failed, and seemed instead to be more focused on self-promotion than on getting their work done. And the online safety bill treads a very, very worrying path between protecting people and ensuring the vitality of our communications regimen, and at the same time encouraging it to self-censor. The idea was to address content that, while not strictly illegal, could cause significant harm to individuals or society, such as misinformation, hate speech, or content promoting self-harm. At what point do you draw the line? And the intense lobbying from the high-tech companies and concerns about free speech meant that that provision was abandoned in 2022 when the proposals were first presented to Parliament. Now, the recent right-wing riots in the UK, exacerbated by misinformation directly from social media, spread on social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook, have reignited this issue. And, you know, people like Jordan Parler, jailed for 20 months after posting messages on Facebook about attacking a hotel where asylum seekers were based. And the hundreds of people arrested over last week's far-right violence. Parler's sentencing in the Leeds Crown Court is the first time, I think, anyone has ever been jailed for actively promoting something on Facebook like that. And this misinformation is something that needs to be challenged, and yet information which is later discovered to be wrong could be considered misinformation as well. How do you define misinformation? You can only define it really with hindsight. Misinformation with malice might be a better way of determining what is wrong. But even there, I cannot imagine that these social media platforms are up to an algorithm that would identify that. We might end up with more of this nonsense where people are using elliptical, euphemistic language to avoid saying trigger words, which is the case in YouTube. And so many people, it just seems to me to be childish to avoid certain words simply because they will get a video taken down. And we all do it. We all do it. Some people do it very obviously. Some people, I mean, I stick my foot in it regularly, I'm afraid, because I'm not terribly good at using euphemisms. I don't like them. I don't like them at all. I find, I remember as a child, I remember one of my teachers saying, be blunt and realistic. And I've taken that to heart. And it's got me into trouble, of course. Nobody really wants somebody to be blunt and realistic. It was bad teaching, but it was effective. And at least it saves time. You can do a lot of apologizing afterwards. But bringing back this issue about harmful but not illegal language. Proponents of stricter online regulation argue that social media platforms have become a breeding ground for harmful content that can have real-world consequences, and they're right. But the argument that by allowing legal but harmful content to proliferate, platforms are enabling the spread of information, hate speech, and other harmful material that can lead to violence and social harm, that's not proven. So simply by censoring, it's simply going to, I would have thought, take the language into a greater form of euphemism. And that promotion will still be there. What we need is, I think, is less of it's a responsibility of the courts, or it's a responsibility of the platforms, and more that it's the responsibility of the individuals, both the individuals who are posting and the individuals who are watching or listening. Which means it comes down to education. I'm sorry to keep beating out this same thing. So those critics who argue that measures to regulate legal but harmful content risks infringing on the principles of free speech are quite right. Toby Young, the director of the Free Speech Union, contends that such measures depart from the principle that anything not explicitly illegal should be permitted. There's also concern that vague definitions of harmful content could lead to overreach, stifling legitimate discourse and creativity. Moreover, the issue of practicality, how do you regulate content in a way that's consistent with different platforms and cultures? Or do you want another law on the statute books which looks as if it's efficient, which looks as if it's doing something, but actually is piddlingly useless? And I think having a prime minister who has a background in legal reality means, I hope, we're not going to end up with another law like, for example, the fox hunting law, which says one thing and cannot be implemented. A bad law that wastes a lot of time in Parliament and is fairly pointless in the law courts. It doesn't do what it says it does. Partly because it's a law which is masquerading as one thing while doing something else. It doesn't do either properly. This rise in euphemisms and elliptical language to circumvent censorship on platforms like this one, like YouTube, it's already there. It's already there. And content creators avoid this word, they avoid that word, they have little phrases to dodge algorithms that are designed to flag up harmful content. And this has led to the use of absurd and often silly expressions that, while technically avoiding the censorship issue, fail to address the underlying issue of harmful content. And the practice not only undermines the effectiveness of content moderation, but also highlights the difficulties of regulating free speech in a digital age. The only way of dealing with this is better education, ongoing education for the people who are doing social media content and for the people who are enjoying social media content. Social media companies are in a difficult position. They're caught between the need to protect free speech and the responsibility to prevent harm. What platforms have made efforts to remove illegal content? While they've made those efforts, they've been criticised for being too slow or inconsistent in enforcing their rules. And the UK's Online Safety Act, set to come into full effect in the coming months, aims to hold these companies accountable, with Ofcom granted powers to impose fines and criminal liability on senior executives for serious breaches. But Ofcom is an organisation that is more about appearance than reality. And essentially, certainly in the last government, Ofcom was the organisation that everything was thrown at Ofcom, including regulating reality TV. Actually, it doesn't. It simply gives production even more power. And this is now a rule controlled by Ofcom. So the government can turn around and say, oh, Ofcom deals with that. We don't deal with that. We won't get involved in that anymore. Utter tosh. Utter tosh. It's about an abrogation of responsibility. It's about dodging the issue. We can't dodge this issue because it's on our streets. The debate over censoring social media, regulating legal but harmful content, is far from settled. And while it's clear that we need to prevent the spread of harmful material that can incite violence or cause social harm, there's also a need to protect free speech and avoid overreach. So as the UK government revisits these issues, it needs to balance competing interests carefully, ensuring that new regulations are both effective and fair, that they're actually going to be worth having. And at the moment, I don't think the rubbish which was put forward by Lucy Fraser, Nadine Dorries, Michelle Donnellan is worth having. It's just a lot of verbiage, which is going to tie these social media companies in knots for years. The only people who will make money out of this, the only people who will benefit from this, are the lawyers. The recent riots and the government's response underscoring the urgency of finding a solution that addresses the dangers of harmful content without stifling legitimate discourse suggests that we need to go back to the drawing board and rethink what we can actually achieve. Because I think there's quite a lot we can achieve, but most of it we can achieve by education, by discussing these matters. Even discussing these matters on social media platforms themselves. Responsibility. It comes down to responsibility.